Hey everybody, I am so excited. It's nice to see you. You're looking good. Have you been washing your hands? You know you have. Oh, so sometimes you get lucky when you host a podcast, and sometimes people you really want to know say yes, they will let you interview them. And this guy I'm about to introduce has a bunch of different layers to him. And I don't know all of them, but I know he's done this and he's done that and he's done this, and somehow they make sense to one amazing human. I know him because he's a teacher of magicians and he's an inventor of magic tricks. And I've been kind of stalking this guy, kind of have a man crush on him for a long time. And I took a chance and reached out to him, and he said, yes, I can't wait for you to meet him. Please say hi to my new friend, Dan Harlan. Dan Harlan is in the house.
Hello, everybody.
Dude, I'm so glad
hey,
you
Brad.
said yes.
So, I don't know. I feel a little odd after that introduction. Mostly because I'm pretty sure that as soon as I sign off here, I'm going to have to get a restraining order.
You're safe, dude. We're not even in the same state. You're safe.
Yeah, I don't even know where you are. You look like you're in a dungeon somewhere. Is this your punishment that you're locked up and you're forced to podcast?
Yeah, this is what happens when you're trapped. My family loves me, but I think they're tired of me, and so they said, "Brad, you can just stand over there by the bricks."
There you go. but they gave you a camera and a light, and you're making the most of it.
All right. Well, thank you for saying yes. I'm not lying. The favorite thing for me to have this podcast, Dan, is to have an excuse to call people like you and say, I'd kind of like to know you. And I really want to know the answer to these questions about you. And for whatever reason, you said yes, so thank you.
Well, I don't know if you know this. Here's something that you might not know about me. I love talking about myself.
Well, let's talk about your. I was trying to think about how to describe you, and I'm not even sure what the right answer is. When I say, "What do you do for a living?" What do you tell people?
Well, I'm a magician. And fortunately, I've been able to make a living by being a magician. I also perform stage magic, and that supplements my magicianing. And I'm talking about I can cause things to happen for people who are willing to allow me to tinker with whatever is going on with them. So I'm a consultant, a director, a writer, a possible 3-star Michelin chef, a carpenter, a choreographer, a musician. But all of those things require a certain way of manipulating things. And the way that I like to do it is very magical. It's very transformative.
Right.
So when people involve me in a project, that project produces results that are far beyond what they ever anticipated.
Okay, you're hired. I don't even know what you do. I want you to work with me. Well, okay, so when you say though you're a magician, let's be clear. I don't picture you as one of the guys running out there doing wedding receptions all day long.
No. Although I have done them, and if somebody has a wedding reception that they really want me to perform at, I guess contact me somehow. Have Brad put you in touch with me.
All right, so where do we even start? When I first became aware of you, and I think you were younger than me. I'm 55. Am I close? You've got to be younger.
Yeah, I'm way younger than that.
Okay.
Way younger.
When I first became aware of you, you were you kind of I remember you teaching rubber band magic by, I think, VCR probably. Does that sound right?
Yep.
And you had the crazy haircut, and you were like the hippest, coolest guy doing.
I was just joking. I was just joking about being younger. By the way, my first video was released on a cave wall.
I think I saw that one. Yeah, it was sweet. I rented it twice.
Yeah.
So
yes, I did rubber band magic. I'm willing to go on record here and own up to it and admit to it that I did rubber band magic. And I did it for years, and I did it publicly. I wore rubber bands on my wrist, and I performed for people, whether they liked it or not. Most of them liked it.
I was just describing that Dan to my kids, because I love my kids. They're all college age. They don't have the magic bud. I wanted them to be magicians, but that wasn't going to happen. And I was explaining to them there's this genre called rubber band magic, and you can tell a magician because here's an adult dressed up in nice clothes, and they have not one but several rubber bands of different shapes and colors around, and maybe on the other wrist, same thing, and that's just normal. And my
Yeah.
kids are like, "No way!" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah."
Yeah, yeah, and I used to because I was very instrumental in making rubber band magic into a separate genre. Uh, and before I got involved, there were about 3 rubber band tricks, and then I was bored at an office job, had nothing else to do but play with office supplies, and I just found rubber bands to be very fascinating, and so I started inventing all kinds of rubber band tricks. Um, so I really was the guy on the forefront that caused that to happen. But I always felt a little weird about having the rubber bands on while I was walking around. And I was doing walk around magic at restaurants at the time. And so my opening line for that was, good evening, everybody. I'm the magician here. And I really enjoy performing for you here, but I've got to make it fast because I've got to get back to my paper route.
Well, because it is a weird thing. Because I find rubber band magic to be freaking cool. I love looking
Yeah.
at it. Also, I find it to be odd to see these grown men wearing 19 colored rubber bands on their wrist.
Yeah, and the kids can't use that line that I just said this day. Nobody knows what a paper route is. you say that to some kid, and they're like, paper route? What? Yeah, I used to deliver Yahoo News in a printed
Yeah.
form, wrapped in a rubber band.
Right. What is the app called? A paper route. I don't know that app.
Yeah.
How did this happen that you became a magician? At one point, you said, "I guess this is my job."
Well, I grew up in a theatrical family in that my dad was a part-time musician that was also interested in theater, musicals, directing, that kind of stuff, and so was very active in the community theater in the small town where I grew up. And so I got involved in it. Now, all of the kids did, but he had 4 children, including me, and but I took to it. The rest of them weren't that committed to the idea, but I just fell in love with it. So it isn't necessarily that I made a decision to entertain, it's that I found my calling. And so I was on stage acting in plays and musicals for 7 years before I even became a magician. I started on stage when I was 2, and I didn't learn my first magic trick until I was 9. And by then, I already understood everything that there was to understand about theater because I absolutely immersed myself in it
Right.
and I lived it. So for me, I've always approached it as a performance art, as it is. So I've always really thought about it in the terms of theater, in blocking and scripting and choreography and all of those things, which is a lot different from most magicians. Most magicians are fascinated by the trick or the method or the props or something about that. Whereas for me, it really is the medium through which we communicate that fascinates me. And so that's performance art.
Yeah, you're not kidding. Most magicians come to it from, you know, we're all a little bit wacky, I think. And we're attracted to those tricks and the secrets, and we want mirrors and wires, and then we
Yeah.
realize, oh, it's theater. Dang it, I don't know anything about theater.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is, I think a lot of magicians they realize it's theater and then they think, well, I could never learn that or understand that. And theater is actually pretty easy. I mean, the nuts and bolts part of it is pretty easy, and I give courses on that. And if somebody's interested and they know about penguinmagic.com, they can check out the Tarbell course there, where in lesson 83,
Wow.
magic as theater. They can check that out, and I go through a whole kind of a very fun explanation of how theater has influenced magic, and then how magic has taken those ideas and how you can take those ideas and help them to inform the performances that you do. And then if you really like that, you're going to want to go check out lesson 34, Tarbell lesson 34, which is routining a magic show. And that's my own personal take on how to structure
Mm.
magic. And it's based on the triple trilogy idea and a little bit of the hero's journey, things that might go over your head when I say it right now, but if you check it out, I'll explain it in a way where it makes sense.
penguinmagic.com. Type in Dan Harlan.
Yep.
But also, I'm so impressed that you know the lesson numbers just like that.
Well, I had to remember. I knew 34 for some reason. I always remembered that one. But I've been doing a lot of online lectures, and so I had to find a way to remember 83. And if I told you that, then you'd know how old I was. If you knew why I remember 1983. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to give that up.
I'm so curious.
I like the mystery. If people ask me how old I am, I always say I'm timeless.
Yeah, I noticed you kind of dodged that a little bit. It's okay.
Yeah.
I still like you. No problem. Well, all right. So Tarbell, I want to get there, but can you give us a thumbnail of your career up to that moment? Because you've done a lot of things.
Yeah, sure. So you started out with rubber band magic, which is the first thing that was known by the magic world at large. That was the first kind of big release that everybody knew about. Although I had published before that in the Linking Ring, there was a creativity contest, and I entered that creativity contest. Now, there were no limits on how many items could be entered in that contest. I won an honorary award for the most items submitted, and I'm not sure whether that was
how many did you
a good thing or not. But yeah, it was like 20 different routines, and I was always coming up with stuff. So that was really very early on that happened. And one of those things was some of the rubber band stuff, and then that all sort of snowballed. That really got me the recognition. And then after rubber bands, I also did a video that was shot at the same time. That was the magic of Dan Harlan, the early years. They call it the early years now. They didn't call it that then, but it was the close-up magic of Dan Harlan, and that contained a lot of those original ideas. And then after that, I did impromptu magic, a full series of impromptu magic. Then I came back and I did more rubber band magic because I had caused this groundswell, and all these other creators came out of the woodwork, and they were like, here's a rubber band trick, and here's a rubber band trick, and here's another one. And so I collected all of those, plus all of the new work that I was doing, and I did like a 3-volume set with L&L on rubber bands. Then I did bar bets. So I did a full movie that contained all of these bar bets and con games and pool hustles and trick shots and all kinds of really cool stuff in that. And that was called Mind Bogglers. And then after that, I came in and I did Pack Small Plays Big, which was the way that I was earning my living at that time. I was doing shows out of a briefcase. So I would show up to the show and do a full 30 to 45-minute show out of one briefcase. And I wanted to show people how you can do this, how you can work very practical. Because I was working a lot of corporate gigs, home parties, and comedy clubs. And I needed a way to be able to set up in a corner of a room or to walk on stage and set up on a stool. And so I did 9 of those. And then I came back and I did 9 close-up shows that were called Premium Blend. At that point, I think before that point, I had already put out more magic on video than any other creator before or since. And then I started working. Well, I started working all over the world. And fast forward to my association with Penguin. As soon as I started with them, they bought the idea of the Tarbell Project, and the Tarbell Project was, all 102 lessons done on video, revised, updated, and modernized with full performances, full explanations, and I built everything. I wrote everything. I costumed everything. I performed everything in front of a live audience, and that has resulted in 13 and a half days of continuous footage. If you were to attempt to binge watch the entire Tarbell course, it would be nearly 2 weeks, not from start to finish if you didn't stop. I don't recommend it. But what I'm basically saying is I have performed more magic than any other magician ever has at any time, ever, and ever will.
Well, let me just stop you. Because for anyone listening to this who's not a magician, this kind of being prolific is just so not normal. Dan, you haven't done just a little bit more. It's been massive. And I'm so interested in the why. Because
Yeah,
I don't
I
know.
absolutely love this. I love what I do. I love everything about it, and because of that, I want to inspire everybody else. I want them to know that anything that they think is possible, even if it's an outrageous goal, you can achieve it, and you can achieve it to whatever level of skill you have. One of my mantras is, the more times you do something, the better you get at it, regardless of where you start. So if I don't know how to do something and I want to do it, I better start now because I need time to get good at it. So if you're out there as a magician and you're thinking, well, I could never learn to script well, or I could never learn this particular sleight or this skill, it's just because you haven't put the time into it.
Right.
So either you don't love what you're doing, or you just don't have a real dedication to it. You have to find the thing that calls to you and then do it and keep at it. Just keep at it. You will rise to whatever level you can make. And so that's kind of why I'm saying I just can't stop, because I want to be able to do everything really well. And it just fascinates me to no end. Every bit of it, the mechanical part of it, the theatrical part of it, the decorative part of making props, all of the things are interesting to me.
Let me ask you about the business side of this. And
Sure.
I don't want to cross that line into annoying, but I want to be right up next to it.
All right.
I'm a performer. So I started right out of college. I did magic for 10 years and then I morphed into professional speaking. So I'm very familiar with the business side of being on stage. I am not at all familiar with the business side of doing one of the things you do, which is sell to magicians.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always blown me away. And I can you walk through that? Like, were you able to make a
Yes, I
living
can.
by continuing to put out, here's a VCR, another VCR, but oh, here's DVD. How does
Yeah,
that
look,
work?
I fell into that pretty much accidentally. So the first product that I ever marketed was a thing called a color mixer. It's a Hexaplex Gun. I don't know if Hexaplex
I
Gun
don't know
strikes
what
a
that
chord with
is.
you, or if you remember it.
I
You
have
can
no
look it
idea.
up online now. Back when I read about it, it was in a Martin Gardner book. So I always read, in addition to being fascinated by theater and all the other things that I've said, I'm also fascinated by recreational mathematics. Absolutely love math. So I read all of the Martin Gardner stuff, and much of that has informed what I've done over the years. But this particular thing is called a hexaplex gun. You can look up how to make one, and they're typically just made out of paper, and they're really cheap. So I decided I wanted to put it into my show. I wrote a little routine. I came up with a way to do it. I came up with a way to make it where it would last for a long time. And if you don't mind me while I'm talking, I'm going to reach over here and
Heck
bring my
yeah.
bag up.
Grab that
Maybe I
thing.
have it. Maybe I have it in
Sweet.
here,
Come on,
because
Lucky Seven.
it was something that I used in my last um, public performance. But anyway, so I made this thing and I performed it at a magic meeting, and the magicians who saw it had never seen anything like it, because obviously I had the only one in the entire world. And then they asked if I would make one for them. And I said yes, because I didn't know any better and I had no idea what to charge for it. And so I just started for a few people charging for this thing. And then I just found that I liked making things, and they were good, interesting, unusual, unique ideas. And why would I want to keep those away from people? I'm trying to inspire people to be better. So why would I restrict my ideas? But I at least have to be compensated for coming
Yep.
up with them and for
Sure.
manufacturing them. And so it was really just a matter of me learning the business. But I already knew coming into it that I wanted to be unique in the business. I didn't want to be a follower. I wanted to be a leader. And so my ideas were always influenced by things that were outside of magic. And then I would find a way to create a magic trick based on this idea. So here's the trick. So this is it. It's a color mixer.
Oh,
It
goody.
has two sides. It has a red side and a yellow side. Now it's supposed to show you how to mix these colors together, but it doesn't. but it does do this weird thing. I don't know if you noticed that instead of turning it over, I can also turn it inside out to show you the other side without turning it over. And if I do that enough times, I get a different color like blue. You see, blue would be the third primary color. There's red, there's yellow, and there's blue. Those are the three colors that you use to mix to get other colors. For example, if you mix red with yellow, well, then you get orange, because orange always comes from red mixed with yellow. But if you were to mix yellow with blue, well, then you'd get green, because green always comes from yellow mixed with blue. But if you mix blue with red, you get my favorite color, which is purple. And purple only comes from blue mixed with red. And since I only have red and yellow, I can't show it to you. So whatever you do, don't get one of these things. It doesn't work.
Okay, that was my favorite part of the day already. That was it. And by the way, I was following you at first, and then I'm like, well, wait a minute. And then by the end, I'm like, that is a lot of colors.
Yeah. So the secret to that one is you have to physically learn a folding sequence. It's not that difficult. It's not challenging to do, but your hands have to be able to do it without you consciously thinking about it. And so that's what makes it sort of magical, is that it just seems to happen without effort. So it does teach a lot about sleight of hand, because that's the same thing you have to do with sleight of hand, is your hands have to perform things with no apparent thought or effort.
Okay, I'm with you, but I'm bringing you back. We're back on that path, Dan. How does this turn into a business? What is the business of selling to magicians? Because it seems to me when I go to a magic convention, there's a lot of magicians. But if you look on the planet, how many people buy magic tricks, it's got to be a tiny percentage. So can you walk us through that?
So I would say, here's really comes down to this. I mean, there are on this planet probably, well, maybe in 100,000 to 200,000 active magicians that identify with magic groups, that are members of IBM worldwide, the SAM, or some other group. So they come to the online conferences. They are actively involved in magic, and out of that, say 200,000, probably tops. So out of that, there are probably somewhere in the range of maybe 20,000, so 10% that are really that buy things a lot all the time. That's it. But worldwide, you're really not looking at a huge market. A big selling trick back when I started would sell 2,000 units. So that's what you would look at. 2,000 units for a big selling trick. It hasn't changed much, but with the advent of the internet, it's up to about a really big selling trick is somewhere around 5,000 units. You really have to think to yourself, this is a niche market,
right,
that is all about novelty. So if you sell something that's novel but not good, you're ruining your potential sales for the rest of your life. So what you have to do is you have to find novelty that also is possible, practical to perform. So I decided early on that I would never sell anything that I didn't perform. So everything that I've ever sold, I have performed in front of a regular lay live audience, every single thing. And that includes the Tarbell course. I wouldn't do the Tarbell course without actual performances. There's no way that I would just teach a trick and say, you could do this or you could do that. No, I want to see what you actually can do.
Right.
And so that's why, to me, that's the line that I never back off on that. I have to perform everything I've ever done for an actual audience, so I know how they're going to react, and I can teach you what you need to know.
But let me stop you there. That's a big deal, because you and I both know there's a lot of magic out there that's been produced and manufactured that's just crappy. It just never should see the light of day. And so you having that high standard.
There is that. Yeah, there is that. But I would say even if it's not bad, most gimmicks and things like that have been developed for magicians, to fool magicians, and haven't been performed for a regular audience. So that doesn't mean they're bad, though. Interestingly enough, one of the reasons why they don't sell well is because there isn't a demonstration for a live audience. And the better of those gimmicks would sell more if we could see how people really react, if we had a routine, if we had something to do. And of course, nowadays, routines amount to, TikTok videos of look at this, and now it's different. So anybody with a flap or a magnet can make themselves successful as a TikTok magician,
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that at all. I applaud all venues and all performers who are able to capitalize on those venues.
Hold on, I got to take a note. You said I need a flap and a magnet?
Flap and a magnet, that's what you need.
Flap, magnet.
Yeah, if you got an idea, if you have anybody out there, if anybody has an idea for a trick, then just send it to me and I'll send you back a flap and a magnet. $5 for a flap and a magnet, and it'll work for every trick. It is pretty much true.
There's so many questions I want to ask you. Selling magic has changed a lot. When I was right out of college, I was a demonstrator. I worked in magic stores, and I was the guy that showed you what it looks like. Now, one, there aren't many magic stores, and two, it's better because instead of seeing Brad Montgomery in Denver, Colorado, try to do this trick, we can see the originator, Dan Harlan, do the trick he made up on video perfectly. Can you talk to this change?
Yeah, absolutely. This actually speaks to a point that I was going to make earlier that I'm happy we brought it back around. And that is that when I started creating these things and started selling these things, there wasn't internet or video conferencing or any of that kind of stuff. And I would either have to sell face-to-face. When I came up with that trick, the color mixer, that was only because I was going to that magic meeting. So the only audience, the only customer base I had would be the 30 magicians in that room, and 2 of them were interested. So because I knew that 2 out of 30 were interested, and I knew that there were 1,000 magic clubs, so there you go. You got your 1,000 magic clubs. That I could get 2 out of all of those 30, so I could get 2,000 people to buy it. So I knew it was going to be a hit. Right? But I had to reach them. And then the only way to reach them was to place an ad in the Linking Ring magazine. So I had to come up with an ad for the Linking Ring magazine. And so I happened to be a graphic designer at the time. Did I forget to mention I'm an artist and designer? Yeah, I think I did.
Let me get Cork Express.
So I designed this ad, or I was in the process of designing this ad, and just so happened to be that 2 months later, the IBM National Convention, I believe it was held in Nashville, Tennessee at that time. It doesn't matter what year it was and all that kind of stuff, was coming up. And I realized, wait a second, there are 1,000 magicians here at this convention, so I can get X many of them to buy this thing. If I bring that many of them, I can make this much money. It's really just math. Once you know what your market penetration is,
right,
you can extrapolate out to how you can do that. You just have to reach the audience. Reaching your customer base is what it's always been about. So all that to say this, I spent the next 2 months investing my own money and my own time in making a trick that I thought had the potential to sell. So then I went to Nashville, Tennessee, to the IBM. I sat in the lobby and I did this all day, just this, all day, until somebody would come over and say, hey, what is that thing? And I'd say, oh, this thing, this is a color mixing guide. It's supposed to show you how to mix colors, but it only has 2. It has red. And I'd go right into the routine and then sell them literally like hotcakes because they were stacked up like that. And I would just sell them like hotcakes.
Wait, back.
But that required, okay, so hold on. So that required a ton of effort, a ton of money, and a commitment to maybe never getting that money back. But I did. I sold everything because I knew that this was something they'd never seen and that it would be interesting for them. That's what the business we're in is, a novelty business. But I knew that this was also something that was really good. So not just a cheap knockoff. Right. This is original and novel, for real. So then, because it was a success there, I then went back to my ad for the Linking Ring, and I added in that it was a sellout success at the IBM convention, because it was. I sold all, I don't know, 50 or 60 of them.
Right.
It's just a stack, like, right? I sold them all. So a sellout at the IBM National Convention. And then I placed that ad. And in those days, that ad wouldn't appear for 2 months.
Oh.
So you put the ad in, and then you wait, and then it's not in the next issue. It's not in the next issue. It's in the issue after that. And it's still that way in print ads. It's just still delayed. So the whole thing I'm getting at is that my success story was a matter of patience and dedication and commitment to what I believed in. Nowadays, you come up with something like this, you make one, you film a video, you put it on your social media, you put a price on it, and you wait a week. And if it's not a success within a week, you move on to something else. But I mean, it's just ridiculous how easy it is now for anyone to put out a new product. And if you can't do it on your own, you contact somebody like me and I produce it for you. You contact one of the other big producers.
But one of the things
you don't have to find my phone number. You don't have to look through the Thomas Register of companies to find a manufacturer. You don't have to do any work at all. You just bring your idea to somebody who knows what they're doing already, and they walk you through the process. So it's a completely different world. I absolutely love it. I think there's nothing wrong with that. I wish it had always been like this. I would have retired by now.
One of the things I love about that story, though, Dan, is not what you think. I love the fact that you're this young guy saying, I got an idea, I'm going to bet on myself. And you didn't go through the exhibit hall and buy the expensive booth. You just said,
I didn't know to do it
in the lobby.
I also had no idea. I didn't know how to do that. To me, the dealer's hall was for dealers. I wasn't a dealer. I was a guy with a trick. I didn't even know that I was selling magic, really.
Right.
I was providing this trick and making some money for myself with something that they couldn't get from anybody else. So there was no, it's not like I was competing. I was setting up a dealer's booth or anything like that. So and that's the last time I ever sold in the lobby. I just want you to know that. But honestly, if you think about it, there is nothing wrong with an individual coming up with an idea that's non-competitive and selling it directly to anybody else.
Yeah,
There's no law against it.
That doesn't bother me at all. I think it's impressive.
But what I'm saying is that had I known that I could be a dealer, I would have gone that extra step. I would have actually bought the space, because it's worth it when you think about it. Because all you do is you extrapolate, how successful can I be with the ideas that I have? What have I demonstrated? How much money can I make? Well, I can make more money if I get an audience that knows that they're coming to spend. So if I pay $150 for a dealer space, will I make that $150 back? In this case, this was like $20. So will 7 or 8 more people buy it? And the answer is always yes. Right. 7 or 8 more people will buy it, because they are there to buy things, and they go from one place to another. So anyway, once I learned that, then I always set up a dealer space every time I had something. It was always in conjunction with other things and other projects that I was doing. And there were more products. I started to learn that, yes, you need at least a half a dozen items on the table. You need to demonstrate all the time. But if you immerse yourself in the world, you learn the tips, the techniques, and what's necessary. It's just like I said before, the more you do something, the better you're going to get at it. So if you want to do it, you better start now.
So up to the point that you connected yourself with or became connected with Penguin Magic, what percentage of your income was based on selling videos, instructional videos, and magical props, versus you walking on stage and saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, here's a trick"?
Yeah, sure. It has always vacillated, as you would expect it to do. but it's always hovered around 50-50, So there most of the time, like when I first started out, and we didn't have the instantaneous communication that we have now. So when I first started out, I was making more of my money doing shows regionally. So I had already marked out a region. I grew up in Ohio, and I was working that whole region. But then I moved to Michigan when I was pretty young, and I had an agent for the entire state of Michigan, and he was the best agent of all. So he covered all of Michigan. So that was my territory, was all of Michigan and a little bit of northwestern Ohio. But I was working a ton of corporate gigs because he had the best clientele that there was. So I would do all of these corporate things, and I would do all of these big public shows, and then every kind of seasonal event that somebody had. And these weren't just small shows. I was doing 2-hour shows for people because I was able to theatrically put it together. So my shows always sold. I was the most expensive act on his roster. Let's just put it that way.
That's a good place to be.
On purpose. So I was making most of my money doing that. And actually, let's see. And that was after I had introduced probably 2 or 3 tricks and had just decided that I was going to start lecturing. Because back in those days, the only way that you could actually make money was to go on the road and lecture and have the products with you. It's still very similar, but back then it was the only way to do it.
Right.
So I would spend 2 weeks on the road, and then I would spend 2 weeks off. So that was about the way I was doing it. So half of my time was devoted to selling things, half of my time was off covering the other gigs that would come in, and I would have to find a way to break that up because my weekends could never be away, and it was a mess. It was an absolute mess. But 80% of my money was coming from performing, and 20% was coming from selling. But I also knew that the market for selling magic was much bigger and more under my control, because anybody that performs for a living knows how hard it is to get, or how much effort it takes to get the gigs. There's a lot of cold calling that was involved and those kinds of things. Because I had an agent, that just freed me up to do other things, but it was still kind of a juggling act. But then I invented Card-Tune. so let's just go right to Card-Tune, because that changed.
Let's go to Card-Tune.
It changed everything, as you can well imagine. I was talking about successful magic selling 2,000 units.
Right.
Yes, that was a successful trick. A blockbuster would sell around 10,000. It was like unheard of, 10,000
What
units.
would be
And we're
another
talking like
example
over
of
the course of a year. You'd sell 2,000 over a year. Is everything okay?
Yeah, give us an example of another blockbuster, something that was big.
So blockbuster during my time, or it might be a book. I mean, a book can be a blockbuster as well. I remember that Sankey Panky, like Jay Sankey's book came out then, and that was a blockbuster. It was a really, really amazing, different book, and everybody got it, and it just sold just like great, right away. I was just trying to think of like a physical kind of trick that had come out during that time, was selling really, really well. Just nothing jumps to mind immediately. Okay, but then every once in a while there will be these tricks that just take off. They're just, I guess you could call it a fad, but only for the initial peak, and then it just keeps going. So a trick like the invisible deck sets a precedent. Oh, Color Monty, that's a trick that sets a precedent. It sells so well, and then just continues to sell and sell and sell and sell and sell. And then there are a couple of tricks every once in a while that just defy all logic. And one that you would know of is Delight. So Delight, when that came out, every interested magician in the world got one. And the same thing happened for me with Card-Tune, is that every magician in the world got one. So it sold 100,000 in the first year, 100,000 units. The first,
You
I mean,
must
it's
have
so,
been.
okay, here's the thing. You know how I talked about developing and sitting in the lobby and my own money and all that kind of stuff? Well, the same situation was going on with Cartoon. I was trying to figure out how can I afford to produce this. So, because it cost a lot to produce a deck of cards in those days. In fact, I'm the reason, or Cartoon is the reason that you can get custom printed cards from Bicycle,
What?
because you couldn't. Yeah, all right, so here, let me explain the situation. When I came up with Cartoon, obviously and naturally, I drew it on a red back bicycle, because back in those days, kids, that's all you had. You had Bicycle B, Aviator, Tally Ho, not like nowadays. There's no way you can have every deck nowadays. But the most respected and the most used was red back bicycles. And also you had to use the red back for the animation. So that's what I drew it on. And that's what I thought it would always be on. So I had the idea and I approached Bicycle with it. And by approaching, I mean, I had to find the phone number. I had to track down the person. I had to make an appointment for them to call me. It was awful.
Right.
So I get to the custom printing department for Bicycle and I say, I've got this idea. I want to print a stick figure animation on the back of a Bicycle brand deck, overprint on your cards. They said, absolutely not. Nothing can be printed on Bicycle backed cards. You can print it on any other back design. You can come up with your own back design. You can do whatever you want to, but our back design is sacred. That's what they said.
Right.
And I said, okay, so let's say I come up with a back design and I want to print it. How do I go about that? And they said, okay, our minimum order is 25,000 decks for a custom print, 25,000 decks.
Wow.
If you want it on the stock that we have, the air cushion finished stock, 25,000 decks at $5 a piece.
Ooh.
So you're looking at $125,000 that I would have had to invest,
Ooh.
and I would have had 25,000 decks that I didn't know were going to sell. I knew that there was interest because I had shown people, and so I knew I had extrapolated out what I thought I could potentially sell, but it was not 25,000 decks. I didn't think I could sell 25,000 decks in a lifetime. So I just happened to be on lecture tour at the time in Minneapolis, St. Paul, so in the Twin Cities. And I was in Minneapolis, and St. Paul is the home of Hoyle playing cards. And I didn't really know that either. So somebody in Minneapolis said, well, have you talked to Hoyle? And I'm like, who's Hoyle? So they said, well, they're just across the river. And I said, okay, well, I need a phone number. And I called up, and I still remember that Gwen answered the phone in the custom card department. And I said I had the same thing. I said, I have this stick figure I've drawn. I want to print it on the back of Hoyle back cards. And she said, okay, we can do that. And I said, all right, what's the minimum order? Because I had learned minimum order. I didn't know minimum order was a thing until now. But what's the minimum order? She said 5,000 decks. I'm like, 5,000, not 25. She said, yeah, 5,000. And I said, and what's the cost per deck? $1.89.
Ooh, we're in.
And I said, all right, wait a second. Now we're talking numbers that I might be able to afford. So again, this was another situation where it was very close to the IBM convention. And this is hilarious, the difference. So you see the difference in years that this made. So at this IBM convention, I did have a dealer's booth. I was co-publishing the Minotaur magazine and also selling my products that I was doing on lecture. And so in addition to doing that, I took a moment, just one day, like the first day when it was not busy, to walk around to all of the other dealers and demonstrate the prototype deck. So I showed them, I said, here's a prototype. I'm going to be making these, and I was just wondering if you want any. So in one morning, I had already had orders for 6,000 decks. And it was paid for. I mean, well paid for already. Yeah. I believe I did the first Kickstarter. But really it was like, so this is what I'm talking about, is that I used to put in legwork and a lot of effort, but because I had already established myself and because my ideas are unique and different and come from outside of magic and aren't just a different take on things, the stuff that I market, that's what interests people. But had they not been interested, had the dealers not been interested in it, I would have known that. I would have had a gauge. I would have known how many I could sell and what I could afford and all that kind of stuff. So I obviously I invested in it and I bought more decks than I needed to fill for the orders. And then the orders just kept coming in and in and in. And within the first year, I had sold 100,000 decks. And it continued like that for quite a while, and then I eventually sold the rights years and years and years ago.
I didn't know that.
Because I mean, I looked at the graph, and here were all of these sales for the first 2.5 years, and then it was just plummeting like that. So I didn't want to have to keep track of the whole thing and keep investing my money to do it. I figured that was it. But it was one of those tricks that always sold consistently. And then the only reason that it ever started making money again is because of the internet and because Jamie Raven did it on Britain's Got Talent. So he performed the trick on Britain's Got Talent. That renewed interest in the trick around the world. And so, yes, of course, the graph just went immediately back up. And it's going to do the same thing. It's going to be the same slope that comes down and bottoms out. It will never bottom out. It will always sell consistently, like an invisible deck sells, like Color Monty sells, all that kind of stuff. But those kinds of tricks are so unusual, and you can't predict them. I really had no idea. I knew it was a good trick. I didn't know it would become an all-time classic to be held to that standard, and it has. And I'm proud of it, of course.
You should be. I don't know any magician who doesn't own that magic trick. I own one of them.
Yeah, and if they don't, they're not a magician.
But also, Dan, what I love about that is, again, you're just willing to roll your sleeves up, and you're willing to get that booth, and you're willing to say, maybe I'll just go show it to every other dealer. And you're willing to make the calls. And so there's so many steps of that that are very impressive to me.
Yeah. Well, and now, I mean, it's the same steps, but now everybody can do it because they can film a video of themselves and then pitch that to all the dealers or all the distributors. See, in those days, I didn't even know about distributors. I had no idea what a distributor was. I really had no clue at all about the business side when I started out. So I was going to all the dealers, and then one of the dealers that was set up there was D. Robbins, and D. Robbins was and maybe still is. I don't even know if they still are, but they're a dealer distributor, so they do both, things. So I didn't know what a wholesale price was. All of these things that I had to learn along the line. So when I showed it to D. Robbins, they were like, "We want a gross of these," and I'm like, "A gross? There's nothing wrong with this trick. This is not a gross." And they're like, no, a gross it's 12 dozen, which is dumb. I'm like, okay, well, that's the dumbest number I've ever heard of. Well, 12 dozen. Who thought of that? So you want 150 decks? No, we want 144 is what they want. 12 dozen. Don't give us any more. So anyway, so I learned that, and I said, you want a gross of these? And then this is the dealer price. And they're like, no, we pay jobber. I don't even know what a jobber is. And they showed me the numbers. It's the first time I had seen the breakdown of the numbers and how they pay less than the dealers pay at wholesale, which is less than retail. So there's all of these levels of commerce that people typically go through. And I learned a very valuable lesson. And that is, if you really, really want to sell a lot and sell them quickly, you got to convince a distributor. So nowadays it's easy. You make a video of your idea, you go to Penguin or Vanishing Ink or anybody that's established, or you can come to me in a little while. I'm establishing a new production company. You can come to me. Don't, please, all of you, please. Wait a little while. Don't inundate me with your ideas. But yeah, I am going to be starting to produce things again on my own as a producer.
Good for you.
But that's it. Now you could take care of the whole business in 2 or 3 days, a week tops, and be ready to go.
Well, you kind of opened a crack at something I want to ask you more about.
Mhm.
When we started Magic, there were, like you said, bicycle cards. Everyone used redback bicycle cards, it seemed. And now, if you go onto these sites, there's a million different flavors of cards. So what I think happened was computerized printing, but I'm not positive. And I think it became really cheap, but I'm not positive. But I know for sure that the fact that it was cheaper to print changed Magic
Yeah.
and magic tricks. Can you talk about that? Because I think you really know.
I can just to the extent that I know about it from the perspective that you're talking about, and that is the nuts and bolts perspective. Because yes, four color printing used to be extremely expensive, um, and preparing artwork used to be done physically. I was a graphic designer at the advent of them being able to create press ready plates off of digital work. You would create digital artwork and then send it to this big machine, and this machine would burn in the plate that would then go to the press to ink the thing. That was unheard of before that particular time.
Sure.
So that's where I came into it. They were still using typesetting machines and changing over to using computer interface and that kind of stuff for a PageMaker and all of that. I don't know if anybody remembers PageMaker,
I
one
did
of the
it.
original. Yeah. So I mean that's where I was coming into this. In the year 1984 is when I had my first professional graphic design job, and I think PageMaker was introduced in 86 or 87. So this was what they call the bleeding edge of printing. So it was, if you didn't spend $100,000 for this machine, you couldn't do turnaround in one day. It would still take you 4 days to go to press. But if you had $100,000 to spend on the machine, you could go to press in one day, and that was supposed to beat your competition enough that you'd get enough to pay for the machine, but it wasn't always guaranteed.
Right.
It was you're bleeding money to try to stay ahead. So eventually, everything caught up where now it's like 100% automated. It's direct to press printing. So you just need digital artwork, and it's cheap to print it because there is so few physical steps that are involved, and none of the big machinery and all of that kind of stuff that's involved in it. And it's just become very, very fast, very easy to do, much more accurate. All of the color matching, all of the registration, all of these things that were always a problem that people had to do have been automated. I don't want to get too into the graphic design thing of everything, but yes, anything that can be printed is easier to print well at a higher quality. And so that revolution happened, and Magic's kind of always behind the times. So it wasn't until you got, I believe, where everybody was doing, what do they call it now? It was all the moves with cards and no
Oh,
tricks.
cardistry.
Cardistry is what they call it now. They were calling it something else before, and that's why I was trying to remember. So and I'll probably remember what it is. It was something dumb. It was like Card X or something like that, because everything was Motocross X was the big or Extreme football or whatever it was. So it was during that time that cardistry was starting out, and with cardistry, it's all visual art. It's a very beautiful and visual medium. So they started thinking about adding different visuals, and so you had a lot of the people that were into cardistry that were looking for a different color back or something that didn't exist before. And I think it's because of those two things converging at the time, the ability to quickly create anything, that's sort of struck the fire for let's make cards more artistic and fun to look at.
Right.
Let's broaden what we think of as a playing card back. And it's resulted in some really incredible stuff. I personally love the whole idea of it. I've never been a purist, as far as having to use bicycles for everything. When I started out as a kid, I could only afford aviators, so that was my deck of choice.
Those were some crappy cards.
Those are awful.
Well,
But you can mercury fold those all day long and not break a sweat.
I remember, it's embarrassing to admit, but I was old school. I learned with Bobo's Coin Magic and Henry
Sure.
Hay.
I've got 3 of those right here.
Oh, some old schools.
Four of them.
So then I, as many people do, I left because when I became a public speaker, and that took all of my energy. And then I came back, and suddenly there's all these. Oh, look at these decks! They're so cool, and I didn't know what they were, Dan. Meaning, I thought the cards must be different. It never occurred to me, oh, this is the same damn thing. It just looks different.
Yeah.
So I remember buying them, like a handful of decks, and spent a fortune on these packs of cards. And I was, and I was really disappointed. Like, these are just cards. And then the first time I brought one of those cards out, Dan, to do a magic trick, I remember where I was, and I was showing it to a bartender, and I brought it out, and he said, "That's a fancy pack of cards." And he didn't mean that as a compliment. He did not mean that as a compliment.
Yeah, you still have to be a little careful with what you choose to perform with, and I've never intentionally had to perform with a deck of cards that was out of the realm of normal looking. Normal looking to people is any kind of regular rectangular pattern that's got a continuous border around it and something in it. I mean, there's that kind of thing. You can introduce a back design that people have never seen, as long as it echoes all of that symmetry. They'll just accept it because they don't really know. They've seen Hoyle backs, they've seen bicycle backs. They know that there are different flavors of back design. But when you get into stuff that's really, really interesting, artistic, and unique, well, then you got to expect that they're going to pay a little attention to the back design. And my cat's telling me we have to finish, but I think
I thought I heard something.
Yeah, he's down here saying you've been talking too long.
All right, well, I don't.
We've gotten rid of him. We're kicking him out.
So do we have time?
We do. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, if he's not interested, he doesn't have to listen.
I want to get to Tarbell. You need to tell us what Tarbell is. My set is right over there. I'm a proud owner of the Tarbell. I've read that dang thing, but you are the expert. Can you explain what the Tarbell course is?
Yes, well, the Tarbell course, I guess for anybody that is not familiar with it at all, can best be described as an encyclopedia of magic that is roughly 100 years old in general. So you have all of these volumes. There's a perfect time for all of the interruptions. Somebody just knocked on the door. Don't worry about it. So, because this is the boring stuff. So everybody tune out right now. Get yourself a snack, and we'll be back in a second. So you have all of these volumes of magic, and each one is apparently a lesson. They originally started as a correspondence course lesson. So through the mail, you would get these lessons and a few little trinkets of tricks, and you would learn how to do it. But it's all been rearranged and reorganized and all changed around. So now you have the original 6 volumes that were about 100 years old. You've got a 7th volume that was put together in the early 80s. I think, if I remember right. And that was by Harry Lorraine, putting that together with a bunch of stuff that was happening then. And then you have an 8th volume that goes back to the stuff that was discovered in Harlan Tarbell's trunk of writings for it that didn't make it into the original 6, but for some reason, it's still good enough to be published. And so even though it doesn't really follow the way that an encyclopedia would follow and be alphabetical or be a good reference, because it's not a good reference. I'm sorry, it's not organized. It doesn't make any sense where everything is. Maybe someday, I'll buy the rights and I'll reorganize it alphabetically so that you can find things with tabs. Ooh, that'd be neat. So anyway, so it's got so many tricks in it. They're so good as far as the basic idea of them, but they are very, very dated as far as the presentations and a lot of the materials that were used in those days. There's a bunch of things that people would look at and go, well, that's just kind of weird and dumb and doesn't make any sense. But because I've studied them my entire career as a magician, I've studied. I've read Tarbell. I would say maybe 24 times minimum. I mean, cover from the beginning of 1 through 8, the whole thing. So anyway, it is so massive and covers so much magic that a lot of magicians will just say to any trick they see, it's in Tarbell. Now that's not true.
Right.
Not everything is in there, but generally speaking, there's very little that is so new that it's not in Tarbell. Most of the stuff that you see is related to what's been published.
It's sort of mythological, like, it's in the Tarbell course. Do you have the Tarbell? You haven't read the Tarbell? It's in there. It's this thing is bigger than it is. Like in our minds, it's massive.
Yeah, because there are, I hesitate to say this, but there are better collections of magic than the Tarbell course that have a higher quality consistently all the way through. The Tarbell course has a lot of really, great magic in it, and then it has a lot of stuff that just needs a lot of work. Right. So when I committed to doing it, I knew that there was going to be quite a bit that had to be fixed just to make it performance ready. Because Tarbell himself was more of a historian than a great performer. He was a great demonstrator of magic. He was interesting. He could give lectures on magic and perform magic during those lectures, and it was interesting and fascinating. But he was not, the most enigmatic, not the most charismatic, not didn't really understand theater as well as he understood history. So he was more documenting what was going on than reflecting the times and the attitudes of things that were happening.
Well, Dan,
a lot of the stuff that he wrote up wasn't 100% the way it was or performable.
We were at a magic conference together, Magic Live. And so this is in Magic World. That's a prestigious place to be. And here comes a series of TED Talk type things. And then here comes Dan Harlan talking to a room full of magicians. And generally speaking, you don't make it to a magic convention if you're a rookie. You tend to know something if you're there. And then you told about the experience that you've already described earlier of performing each one of those tricks, making the props, doing whatever it takes to get it done in front of an audience and record it on video, 13 days, you said. And that presentation blew me away, Sparky. And I'll tell you one, because it's just a crazy project. But then also it was so interesting for you to stand up there and describe it and to receive accolades from magicians. That was cool. And then the final thing is, that presentation itself just technically was freaking awesome. I was watching you going, this guy's got it. That was a big day.
Yeah. I'll tell you the secret. It was a lot of hard work and planning and rehearsal. That's the secret. So I was given 18 minutes. That's the time slot that I was told, 18 minutes to talk about the whole thing. And so what I did was I prepared an 18-minute long video that had all of the special effects, all of the music, all of the titles and everything. And I made the whole 18 minutes myself. It had my introduction music. It had the announcer. It had my name popping out. It had things exploding. We started off in space. It had us flying through space, and things would pop out from various places for titles. And then we would round this corner. And then all of a sudden, it changed, and I was doing a live performance, and the video would reflect that. And that was all written in and perfectly timed out, including the live performance
No way.
to the second, so that it went regardless of who came from the audience, it was always exactly the same. Now, I only had to give that presentation twice, but I could have done it 100 times and it would have been exactly the same, because I made it perfect. So I went in with that presentation ready, and the technical staff of Magic Live, amazing people, they had never seen anything like it. And they didn't know what to do. They were like, well, when do we hit the button to switch to the next part?
Right.
Where's your cue sheet? I gave them a cue sheet, and the cue sheet was,
turn it on.
When you hear my name, you press go. That's it. Because everything else was already in there. And the reason I knew about that is because I had learned early on about performing at an amusement park. So at amusement parks, they pre-record everything, including the singing, all the music and everything. When you see musicians and singers on stage, none of that is coming through live, and typically for an amusement park, because they just can't risk somebody, instruments out of tune, or if a singer's voice cracks or any of that kind of stuff. So you get a perfect take of the audio, and all of the lights are programmed exactly. All of the special effects programmed, boom, boom, boom. They're going to happen. So it's really a matter of the live performers making sure that they hit their spot and deliver. And that gives everybody the security. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted it to be as professional as possible, because man, I sat through a lot of those demonstrations, and every and technical problem causes the audience to just not have the enjoyment that they should have, and it makes the performers look bad, whether it's their fault or not. So I put in the work. That's why it was so good.
Walk me through the tech side. You said that was a movie. I assumed at the time it was the presentation tool called Prezi. What was it?
Yep. So I did it. I just did the whole thing in Vegas. I pulled in a flight. It was actually a flight that I used in reverse, that somebody that an artist had done from the Earth to a particular place in space. And I contacted them and I said, I'd like to use a clip of this reverse to this point, and then I'm going to change that over, and I'm going to do my own Google Earth where I come through and down into Vegas and fly into the hotel that we were in at the time. So I added that tag on at the end. So that was the basic background. Then I would go back through that basic background and I lay in the music track. So I had all the music cues and all of the sound effects cues that were laid in there. Then I'd go back into that and I put in all the titles and the visuals and put everything over it. Put in some more special effects. There were a few cameos of people that would slide by or pop up, those kinds of things. So once I had that whole presentation, first time, and I wrote it, I scripted the whole thing out by hand, what it was supposed to be. Right. Otherwise, I wouldn't know to do that thing. So then I did that. So then I took my script that I had handwritten and the video, and I typed it all in and changed the wording around, all of that kind of stuff. And then I sat with the script on screen and the video on screen side by side, and I would press play and I would recite the script, and I would go through the whole thing and recite, and I would make sure that I adjusted the video or adjusted the script so everything worked perfectly. Then I printed out the script and I hung it on my wall so that I could read it, and then I would play the video and I would recite the script off into the wall space. Then I would press the video and I would recite the script toward the video, and if I needed to sneak a peek, I would sneak a peek at it. Then I turned everything off and I would go to the script on the wall and I would learn it, and then I would turn and I would try to recite it, and then I would turn back, and this hours and hours. This is the way I learn a script. Hours and hours of trying to get all the way through it. And then once I had it in my head, then I'd put the video on and I'd try to keep up as much as I could. And if I couldn't get through it, I'd stop it and I'd start from the beginning. Always starting from the beginning, always pushing to get further. And then once I got all the way through it, then I just ran it about 50 more times until I was bored.
I bet.
once I got completely bored, I knew I was ready.
All right, so I'm starting to know you better. Between the lines, here's one of the things I'm discovering. You also edited that dang thing. You didn't.
Oh yeah,
You didn't pay anybody because you're like, I'm Dan Harlan. I'll figure this out.
yeah, yeah. Did I mention I'm a video editor and videographer and a photographer? All of these things. Anything that I need, if I have the time to learn it, I'd rather learn it myself so that it can be exactly what's in my head, because no one else knows that. And it's really a challenge to describe artistic visions to people. So I have found that if I can learn it, I can do it the way that I want it to be. If I can't, if I just, for some reason, I don't have the capability, then it takes just as long to describe it to somebody that's really good at it. So sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes there are technical things. Like if I tried to design an app right now, couldn't do it. If I wanted to make an app, I need an app designer. But honestly, if I really wanted to make an app, I think I would study how to program an app, because I also happen to be a programmer. I'm just out of the loop of what's recent. I used to program all the time.
I'm going to change the topic.
Sure.
Darn, you are an interesting guy. All right, so you strike me as the opposite of excellent magicians, and let me explain. I see a lot of magicians that have shows in Vegas and that we all love, and it seems to me, just to oversimplify, Dan, that they invent a show when they're 20, and then they spend 20, 30 more years fine-tuning it and honing it and adding and deleting, but it's kind of the same thing. And then they're amazing. And so a great example of this is Matt King or Lance Burton. They're like, this is my show. But then there's Dan Harlan, who has this enormous knowledge of magic tricks. So what is your take on that? If I hire you and say, this show counts, Dan, we're putting you in front of an audience and it counts, are you going to do tricks that you came up with when you were young that you've honed over a lifetime? Or are you reaching through your massive bag of tricks and picking stuff?
Yeah. So I have the utmost respect, obviously, for Matt King and Lance Burton. Yeah, definitely two of the top guys. And I've seen both of them perform outside of their theaters. Mac especially. I saw him perform on the road many times, and just phenomenal. So the difference is this, and now I got to find a way to say this humbly, because this is going to sound awful. It is. I don't want these guys to think that I'm gloating about something which just happens to be an affliction to me. So I also do what they do. I have an A-list show. I do that. If you book me, you're going to get the material that I've honed over years, that I know, inside and out, and absolutely perfect. No, I'm not going to be doing the new stuff in that show. So I will do that. It's my pat show, but it is the best material that I've ever come up with, and I've done forever. So I mean, like my closing piece in that show is 25 years old, just to give you an idea. And that's my blockbuster closing piece is 25 years old. The actual close of that show is 42 years old. So yeah, I mean, that hurts to think, but it's true. So the simple answer to your question is I'm going to do that quality of show, the same kind of quality that you see other professionals doing, and the same show. If you came to another one, be exactly the same. However, I go beyond that, and they do too. I mean, Lance always did. Mac's show was so interlocking, he didn't want to change too much of it, but But they both, but he even did that. So we do the same thing. It's just that I kind of do at a more rapid pace, more creativity, more often, because I'm also developing material that I know will inspire other people. So I work in genres that aren't necessarily the ones that I would put into my regular show. But everything that I come up with, all these ideas get tested, and they get tested in real shows. So in my show, I usually have the fourth spot after I've established myself for whatever it is that I happen to be working on. And if that fourth, if it's not whatever I've been working on, then I always put the linking rings in there. So it's either 7 minutes of rings or what's new with Harlan. So I have this spot that I love to work with. So it's just because I have this opportunity to develop new material all the time and mess around with it, and it just strikes my fancy. Or like I said, it's an affliction. I just can't stop coming up with things and trying them out. So I do it more often than they do, which I guess is the way to put it. The way to put it kindly is that I because I have to, I'm forced to create more often than they need to, probably than anyone needs to. So I don't necessarily encourage it. I don't think it's necessarily a good thing to constantly be coming up with ideas. If you find something that works and you can make a great living at it for a long time, and that makes you happy, no reason to change it.
Right.
But somebody like Matt King, he added in the cloak of invisibility. I saw him years before that ever became a thing. He added in the goldfish swallowing bit, which I saw him years before that was ever in there, and he keeps adding in things like that.
Yeah.
And then while Lance was working at the Monte Carlo, there were so many great things that he had a chance now to put in. And Johnny Thompson was advising him with things, and Johnny had these big, awesome ideas. And Lance was yes, let's put in this big thing that's never been done before. So that show was amazing to begin with and got better and better and better till the end of it. Hopefully that answers your question.
You did a good job. I love the word affliction. I think I know you're joking, but I think there's some of that. Like, we get bored. I'm the same way. I just got to put in new material because otherwise I get bored. But that's not always the wisest thing, maybe. But I got to do it.
No, but I've just found over the years, I use my triple trilogy structure. That's the structure I was talking about with Tarbell Lesson 34. So I use a structure where there are 9 pieces in the show, and I have just found over the years that piece number 4 is a great place to mess around, to have some fun, to change things up. And the interesting thing about that concept is that you can write the show where number 4 is new material for the audience, but you're really performing old material, and you just say to them, do you want to see something new? And they'll still believe it's new because it feels like the right place for the show.
That's very sneaky, you magician.
In theater, especially in magic, theater isn't about being 100% truthful. Theater is about revealing the truth through a marvelous fiction.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because that's one of my questions. I feel like I could talk to you for hours, Mr. Harlan. All right, so I started out in magic, and then I transitioned to public speaking. So now I'm a motivational speaker, but occasionally I do magic on stage. And my sense of speaking and my sense of comedy is that the trend is towards authenticity. So it used to be the comics were like Bob Hope and saying, just came off an airplane, or let me tell you about my mother-in-law. And now the premises are, let me tell you about my eating disorder, or my struggle with addiction or depression. And I kind of like that authenticity, meaning after you spend an hour with a comic, we feel like we know that comic, at least a little bit, where we never felt like we knew Bob Hope. Magic does not seem to be that way to me. And I don't know, a while back, I saw it on, Joe Diamond was listening to this. I wonder if he's still there. We were talking about it. I saw a thing on TV, and it was this lovely magic piece that was baffling and just hit a home run with the audience, but it was all a lie. It was, oh, this happened to my children, and then this happened with the children, and here's the video reveal of the children, and it was all just bull. And that really bothered the speaker comic part of me, because I'm like, that is such a lie. Can you talk about this concept of, are magicians trying to be authentic? Do we care about that? Can you really say, "Oh, I got this $50 from a swami in China," or is that just such a lie that it's weird?
Uh, it it used to be expected that magicians would tell those kinds of tall tales that everybody knew were bullshit. Okay, I just have to use the word, so
Yeah.
hopefully that isn't offensive. And that used to be expected. Uh, I've in my work, I strive for authenticity, but I've also been trained in theater where I've performed a part where I have not lived what that character has experienced. And you have to, as an actor, you have to be able to portray something that hasn't happened to you. And especially if you're going to get involved in genres that there's no way it could have happened to you, where you get into things like science fiction and some things like that, right? Or historical dramas or whatever. So you try to find the truth in a character that you can't directly relate to, but you find how to portray their truth in as honest a way as you can do it.
Right.
And we could go really deep on character study here, but I apply the same techniques to who I am as a magician. So my magician character is written so that I understand what I'm trying to portray through that character and what the limitations and the realities are. Now, the challenge, of course, is that your audience in general knows that magic isn't real. Now, of course, you'll get all kinds of people who are like, oh my gosh, um, Dynamo walked on water, and he's must be blessed, and he's a real magician, and somehow Chris Angel stopped somebody's watch with his mind, and all this kind of stuff, right? But in general, the rest of the population is going, it's a trick.
Right.
It, right? And they know it, and they know it's a trick. So they know that what we're doing is based on fiction, and they want that fiction to be interesting. And I think that they do want it to be a believable fiction. And so I have felt the sway of magicians, myself included, writing things that are more authentic or that speak more directly to people, or owning up to the fact that what we're doing is a deceptive kind of a thing. Penn and Teller are probably the best about that. Penn, of course, is the best at saying, look, this is just a trick, and you're going to think that something's going on, but really there's something else going on. But in addition to that, we also have other areas of magic, mentalism in particular, that are relying on believable fiction that audiences are now buying into as being truth. That's okay too, as long as they're not being taken advantage of in any way. So all of that to say this, I really like the idea of being as authentic as possible, and I would encourage everybody to try to do it and try to figure out why you're using the props you're using, why you're saying what you're saying, and how that relates to real life, and if there is any kind of message or importance in there. But at the very least, invest yourself in the fiction of being the magician character that you are. What are your strengths, weaknesses? What are your abilities? What can you do and can't you do? And how and why and all. I mean, there's a lot of, again, we could spend way too much time on this. But then try to make that real. Try to portray that character in a way that seems at least authentic.
Right.
That is the struggle, because you're performing for people that know that it's not a trick, or know that it is a trick, know that it's not. This isn't real magic happening. Now, there are times when you will connect with people, if you do this, you'll connect with people in ways that take them to places that you may not anticipate. So also just try to be kind and open and understand that human beings are inherently flawed, you included. All of you have your flaws. And so if somebody believes heavily in what you're doing, be gentle with them. Try to explain it is theater after all.
Right.
And people sometimes get involved emotionally in characters in their best serial dramas and things like that. It can happen that people think you're the real deal. So don't take advantage of them and be gentle. But I love the strive for authenticity. Then the only other point I wanted to make is that magic is, generally speaking, 20 years behind the times. So what you're seeing happening in entertainment now, in about 20 years,
I think you're
that's
right.
where magic will be.
I think we can see that with the dress. It always cracked me up that we knew when we were young, magicians wore tails. Like the only people who wore tails were magicians. Literally, the only people. And somehow that has been so slow to move. All right, brother. First of all, I'm so glad you said yes to this. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a couple of questions left for you, but how do people find you? DanHarlanMagic.com.
So I'm really easy to contact. All you have to do is use my email address, which is contact@danharlanmagic.com. So easy. Pretty easy to remember. If you remember who I am. Oh, I'm Dan Harlan, by the way. Don't know if I've introduced myself. I do magic, so danharlanmagic.com. That's my website. If you want to contact me, contact danharlanmagic.com. And other than that, I'm pretty much unavoidable. If you're interested in magic, I'll pop up everywhere. Yeah, and I apologize in advance for that.
And even if you're not looking for him, you're going to find yourself in a hotel one day, and you're going to see this guy with this shape that changes color, acting like a weirdo in the corner.
Yeah. I'll be in the lobby selling whatever.
And these magicians will be like, "Hey, can I buy that?" And you're like, "Yeah, hey."
Yeah, that's my retirement plan is to come up with the one trick to sell in the lobby for so I don't have to do anything, but I just show up wherever there's a convention, sit in the lobby and sell a trick.
Well, if anyone could do it, Dan Harlan, you can. My topic when I'm talking to my audiences is always related to social and emotional support. So that's like acknowledgement and appreciation and compliments. And as part of that, I like to remind people how powerful it is to encourage others. And all of us have those experiences where we have been encouraged. So I'm curious, who let you know that you had something special? Who encouraged you?
Yeah, well, I've been very fortunate, so I don't want anybody to be jealous about the fortune that I've had surrounding myself with good people. And the reason I've been fortunate is because I have ignored negative people. So it makes it easier for you to find positive reinforcement when you ignore the people that call you names and put you down, don't believe in you, don't understand what you're trying to do. You should always weigh everything everybody says through the lens of whether or not that person actually gets what you want to accomplish. So I've been really fortunate initially because my parents definitely understood theater. My dad was a part-time professional musician and also interested in theater. And so the fact that I was interested in performing, was good for him. He liked that. And he encouraged me. And my mother always encouraged me to do anything at all, and artistically and mathematically and with my studies and all of that. But I also was really fortunate in grade school that my grade school principal was an amateur magician. So when he found out that I had an interest in magic, he also helped me by directing me to certain books, telling me what was in the library there at the school, telling me where the library in the city was, so I could go there and get other books, and even copying out some things from rare manuscripts and stuff like that to encourage me to that, and introduce me to the International Brotherhood of Magicians. So, but those kinds of people will come along. The thing is to be open to those experiences and understand the opportunities that you're given when positive people say, "Oh, you're interested in something. Here's a suggestion." A lot of people ignore those suggestions for some reason. I can't quite understand it. If you like the subject and somebody says, here, check this out, I seriously suggest you check it out, you know. So he was very encouraging. And then when I got into say junior high and high school, my art teachers were all extremely good at their jobs. I happen to be really good at art, so that also is something. If you are good at something, people will take an interest in what you're doing. If you're not good at something and you want to be good at something, then you have to be motivated to keep doing it and take an interest and ask questions and say, well, why isn't this,
Right.
up to the level that you want, and all that kind of stuff. So my art teacher supported me as far as that career goes. My theater director in high school was absolutely amazing, and I was able to really hone a lot of my stagecraft there and in community theater. So they were very, very supporting to me. It's been like that through my early development stages, but honestly, more than that, I would have done it no matter what. I don't think that anyone could have said anything to me that would have stopped me from becoming who I am. I just, again, I do the things that interest me, whether or not anybody cares. I've just been fortunate that people like what I do.
I like what you do.
Thanks.
Dang it. I've taken advantage of your time. We're going to close this up, but not until I ask you the question I warned you I'm going to ask you, the question I ask everybody. Dan Harlan, magician, inventor, deep thinker, creative genius. What gives you hope?
Well, all right. I knew you were going to ask this, like you said, because you sent me this question. It's a great question. Probably my favorite question I've ever been asked, because I've never had to answer it before. So I did some definitely some thinking about it, and here are the things within the realm of what I survey and can control that give me hope. I see a lot of creativity around me all the time. There are very interesting and intriguing, creative and talented people that I'm surrounded by all the time that impress me. And I love the fact that there are people out there striving to make a difference and let their voice and vision be heard and seen. So that gives me hope for the future of creative endeavors that we do. And then also, the other thing that gives me hope is something that many people have been afraid of or negative about. And that is the access that we now have to the world. The instant digital access that we have to anybody at any time, anywhere, actually gives me hope, because it means we can have these kinds of conversations that we couldn't have done this just a few years ago in this way, and have people care about it enough to tune in to hear what I have to say, to hear what you have to say. So that actually gives me a lot of hope, because it also demonstrates that no matter what you do, there is an audience for you. So it's another one of my favorite mantras. No matter what you do, there's an audience for you. So that's great, because if you're a creative person and you want to make a statement, do it. You'll find an audience. There will be people that will gather, and it'll spread. You didn't used to be able to do this because you could only reach locally and regionally and that kind of stuff, and you had to put in so much time and effort. But now you can make a difference in this world and a positive impact. So that gives me hope that people can get their message across all over the world. And then the last thing that gives me hope is in our little realm here in magic. It's nice to see that we're finally making some major strides in diversity and respect for performers that are not typical of what we have seen in the past. Again, there have been people that have been trying to make an impact in magic for years, and they've been shunned or pushed back or whatever. I think it's unacceptable behavior for anyone to be excluded when it comes to art. And magic is a performance art, and so everyone, regardless of age, their race, their religion, their gender, anything, it doesn't matter. Look, don't judge somebody just based on who they are as a person. If you're gonna judge them in magic, judge them on how well they do magic. And then open your mind to different viewpoints as to what magic is. But it gives me hope that people are doing that. And let's move forward and let's continue to do that. And like I said before, it's going to be 20 years before we catch up anybody else who's already done that. But that is part of what hope is about. Hope is about moving forward and in a positive way. So those are the things that currently give me hope, is that we're going to see diverse, creative people from around the world making a positive difference.
Mic drop. All right, everybody, this is Dan Harlan. He said the best way to reach him is contact@danharlan.com. Send him an email.
danharlanmagic.com. Don't forget what I do.
danharlanmagic.com. I put that in the comments. It's there on Facebook if you're looking for it. Everybody, we had a good day, didn't we? Dan, hold on with me. Keep washing your hands, everybody.